The newly minted NDP interim leader says the Liberals have come knocking to try and poach NDP MPs.
I do know that there's been certain calls made by Liberals. I would probably describe them more as feelers.
After years of nonsensical political decisions that only resulted in Jagmeet Singh achieving his parliamentary pension, the NDP have almost been completely wiped off the political chessboard. With Parliament set to return in less than a month, Mark Carney is banking on their collapse to try to persuade some of them to cross the floor in order for the Liberals to form a majority government. The question is whether there is any shred of integrity left within the NDP caucus. Let's take a look. A defeated NDP limps back to Ottawa, confronted with an identity crisis and hopeful to rebuild. From the Globe and Mail. The party's immediate task is to find a new leader to replace Jagmeet Singh, who finished in a dismal third place in his Burnaby Central riding. It will also conduct an internal review to examine how the party did so poorly in the April 28th election. The results of both will shape the New Democratic Party's response to its larger challenge, which is figuring out what it can do to reclaim a place in Canadian politics. The debate will focus on the federal New Democrats' long-standing role as the altruists of Parliament, say some key members of the party who argue it is time to be more pragmatic. They want the party to look at what provincial NDP parties have done to form governments in Ontario, BC, Manitoba, and Alberta. The rebranding process could take one election or several, says former Quebec NDP Matthew Dubé, who was elected during the 2011 Orange Wave. Either way, quote, that should be the path that the party is taking, which is the path to form government, end quote, he said. The party should, quote, take a page out of the playbook of provincial New Democratic parties that have been really successful at not sacrificing their values, but also being pragmatists, end quote. Under former leader Jack Layton, the NDP ascended to official opposition status with 103 seats and almost 31% of the popular vote in 2011. Since then, the NDP has been in steady decline. Little more than 6% of Canadians voted for the party this time out. The caucus that is coming back to Ottawa has an interim leader, Don Davies, but has no recognized party status. That means fewer financial resources, no guaranteed seats on committees, and no assurance of time in question period. Mr. Davies says his party is in, quote, very early, end quote, discussions with the Liberal government to recognize his party. And after tearing up the supply and confidence agreement with the governing Liberals last fall, the New Democrats can expect a frosty welcome back from Prime Minister Mark Carney, who has already ruled out another deal. There will be interest in the leadership job, but it's not the most appealing assignment. Quote, the work is going to have to start at the grassroots across Canada, end quote, BC NDP Premier David Eby said when asked if he was tempted. His answer emphatically was no. 18 New Democrats lost their seats, including Mr. Singh and Brian Mass, who had won Windsor West 8 times. Mr. Davies said they are reviewing what went wrong, but noted a key part was the Trump factor. Quote, we had a lot of really good policies, he said. I actually think that it was a very exceptional moment in time where Canadians were focused on the impact of a foreign head of state, and that drew attention away from, I think, the strengths that our party was offering, end quote. Jenny Kwan, the NDP MP who held her party's stronghold in Vancouver East, suggested the NDP didn't offer an answer to the concerns of Canadians about affordability, and that the confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals diminished the party's brand. Quote, the Conservatives were very busy painting us New Democrats as the Liberals' right hand, and that hurt us. There's no question that hurt us, end quote, Ms. Kwan said in an interview. So, the good thing is that at least some of the NDP are being honest with themselves. It doesn't sound like Don Davies is, or maybe he's just saying what he thinks the leader of the NDP should be saying, but Like her or not, Jenny Kwan seems to be one of the only people who is publicly being honest about what happened to the NDP. It had nothing to do with Donald Trump. They were already on their way down. The main issue with the NDP was that no one trusted them. Why would you? Why would you at all? When Jagmeet Singh kept flip-flopping on what he was going to do and what he wasn't, and I tore up their supply and confidence agreement, and I'm going to tell you over 27 times in the same press conference that I've torn it up.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement with Justin Trudeau. We decided to rip up the agreement. I've ripped up the agreement. Because I ripped up the agreement, we have ripped up the agreement. Well, we've ripped up the agreement. We have absolutely ripped up the agreement. We have ripped up this agreement. We've ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau.
Only to then go on to prop up the government the entire fall session. It was only when the Liberal Party completely imploded from Chrystia Freeland's stepping down as the finance minister to his own party dragging him aside into an emergency caucus meeting late at night saying, dude, you are killing our party, that he finally said, by the way, everybody, we're going to commit to vote down the government in the next opportunity because they don't deserve another chance. 4 days ago they deserved another chance, but not now. Why would you? The NDP's identity in the last parliament was that of the liberal lapdogs. That's it. We saw the memes, we saw all the videos, we saw the articles. They were effectively reduced to a joke because they were. And the only one that won out of the NDP was Jagmeet Singh. And he's just laughing all the way to the bank because now he has his pension and he just won his severance package from Parliament, which he is entitled to half of his salary. Congratulations, Jagmeet Singh. Now, if I'm going to be looking at a leader of the NDP, so far my money goes to Jenny Kwan. Why? While I may not like her and I may not agree with her, and I really hate the NDP's policies, she's the only one being honest here. She said, listen, the Conservatives completely came after us because we were effectively propping up the Liberals. And she's right. And that completely destroyed the NDP brand. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives were immensely successful at that. And she said the other thing was that, it was the supply and confidence agreement that really dragged us down. Yeah, because what that effectively did is tied what you had to do and what you were supposed to do directly to the Liberals. Whatever the Liberals did, you were dragged along with it, and you didn't have any choice. And then you come out and say, well, we introduced dental care and we introduced pharmacare. No one cares. It was an affordability crisis. She is bang on. And we've said this time and time again. What use is dental care when you can't afford to eat?
Free dental care.
Free dental care.
Free dental care.
Free dental care. Free dental care.
Free dental care. Close to 100,000 seniors have gotten free dental care.
This is not free dental care.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, David. It's not a free program.
What use is dental care when you can't afford a home? That's not going to be the priority, people. Now, the interesting thing is that the Liberals are so skittish right now because they are trying however they can to tempt MPs from across the floor. But is the NDP going to bite?
After Mark Carney fell 3 seats short of forming a majority, Neithu, the newly minted NDP interim leader, says the Liberals have come knocking to try and poach NDP MPs.
I do know that there's been certain calls made by Liberals. I would probably describe them more as feelers that have been put out.
But Don Davies believes none of the 7 elected New Democrats will cross the floor to the Liberals.
Our NDP caucus colleagues have committed to being strong, united New Democrats.
We asked the Prime Minister's office if they're trying to pick off any NDP MPs, but they had no comment. While calls like these are likely taking place, Davies and Carney have yet to speak. But when they do, Davies said his first focus will be asking Carney to give the NDP official party status in Parliament, which they lost after failing to get 12 MPs elected. Status would give the NDP regular speaking slots during question period, seats on committees, and money to hire additional staff. Now, one thing both Davies and Carney are not keen on, Neithu, signing a formal governing pact like the supply and confidence deal that was previously signed under Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh.
So, according to Mr. Davies, none of the caucus, if you can call, 7 people a caucus, none of the caucus is going to, take that bait. And why would you? If you've been spending most of your life advocating for a political party, and if you want to be known as someone with any integrity whatsoever, and if you want to continue to get reelected in the future, then you are going to push those chips away from you. Now, I think it's smart for Mr. Davies to come out and say, hey, there's going to be no supply and confidence agreement. That's a good thing. And this shows what we've been surmising is that the NDP really need to work on rebuilding their brand, and that means they need to be distancing themselves as much as they can away from the Liberals. Now, what I would do if I'm Don Davies is saying to Carney, listen, if you want the first budget to pass, then you give us party status. And that's about it. That's all I'm giving them. And then I'm going to be spending the rest of Parliament trying to distinguish ourselves away from the Liberals, trying to reform our own identity and show Canadians that the NDP can still be a force. And let's be honest, folks, it's not going to hurt the Conservatives to have a stronger NDP. It's going to help them. Look what we saw in the last election. If Pierre Poilievre ended up finishing this election with 42%, which is what he did, and the NDP ended up getting their typical 15%, this is a majority government for the Conservatives, right? Because that will siphon all of those votes away from the Liberals. So this is what we actually want. So many are actually looking back at how hard that Pierre Poilievre went after the NDP and said, maybe in hindsight, maybe that was a mistake, because that decimated them so much that all of those voters went over to the Liberals. So, it would have been impossible to see how things were going to be shaking out at that point, way back in the summer and in the spring of 2024, but hindsight's 2020. I think going forward, they're going to be spending much less time focusing on the NDP and all of their time focusing on Mark Carney. And if the strategy of Don Davies and Jenny Kwan is going to employ like they absolutely should, then they're going to be giving the Conservatives no excuse to come after them other than perhaps the first budget vote. Now, we'll see what happens, and we'll see what this price of a of party status is if they actually end up attaining it. But I think it goes to show that the Liberals are very, very concerned that this government is not going to last, because they seem to be trying to poach any NDP that they can, but they may have to move forward with a minority government.